In the shadow of the Pacific Northwest, beyond the fog-laced trees of Appalachia, and deep into the myths of Native American lore, there walks a figure, or so they say. Some call it a hoax, others a cryptid, but to millions it's something more. Proof that mystery still walks among us. This is not another creepy forest sighting reel. This is not cheap clickbait. This is Bigfoot, the definitive investigation, an unflinching, fully sourced, no-nonsense dive into every single major piece of evidence, hoax, sighting, theory, and scientific rebuttal ever presented about the legend, and maybe the reality of Bigfoot. So lace up your hiking boots. This one's going deep. Long before Bigfoot became a pop culture icon or a blurry figure on VHS tape, he was Sasquatch, a being deeply rooted in the oral traditions of indigenous tribes across North America. From the Chehalis people of British Columbia to the Lumi of Washington state, tales describe a tall, hairy, bipedal creature living in the forest, sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying, always elusive. It was a clear autumn afternoon, October 20th, 1967, when two men on horseback, Roger Patterson and Bob GIMLIN, ventured into the rugged wilderness near Bluff Creek, California. Patterson, an amateur filmmaker and passionate Bigfoot enthusiast, had borrowed a 16mm Kodak K100 camera just days prior. Little did he know that the single reel of film would go on to ignite one of the most enduring debates in cryptozoology history. The footage they shot lasts only 59.5 seconds, but in the brief span, we see a large, hairy bipedal creature, later dubbed Patty, casually striding across a sandbar, momentarily glancing back at the camera before disappearing into the tree line. That glance, captured in frame 352, would become one of the most iconic images in paranormal folklore. Let's break it down. The camera used didn't have a zoom lens. Patterson reportedly sprinted toward the creature as it walked away, destabilizing the frame with no tripod. This explains the jittery footage, but it also makes analyzing the subject extremely difficult. Experts have pored over the film for decades. Stabilized and enhanced versions created by analysts like M.K. Davis and Bill Munns reveal intriguing anatomical details. Patty's gait is unlike that of a human. The arms swing low, lower than a human's would. The shoulder blades move with each stride. The leg muscles flex independently, and perhaps most significantly, there's an observable mid-tarsal break in the foot, something consistent with ape locomotion but not found in humans. According to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, an anatomist and tenured professor at Idaho State University, the film reveals soft tissue movement, the visible shifting of muscles under the skin, which would nearly be impossible to simulate with the costume technology available in 1967. He notes the subject's unique body proportions, a 2:4:1 arm-to-leg ratio, consistent with non-human primates but not with Homo sapiens. Skeptics have not been silent. Anthropologist David Deigling and science writer Benjamin Radford have pointed out inconsistencies in the story. For instance, Patterson was known for producing a prior Bigfoot book and had tried to pitch a fictional Bigfoot documentary shortly before the sighting. They suggest financial motivation couldn't have been at play. Then there's the infamous claim by Bob Hieronymus, who in 2002 stated he was the man in the suit. Patterson paid him a few $100s to don a gorilla costume, yet no physical suit was ever recovered, and his description of how it was made fails to account for the complex muscle movement visible in the film. Hollywood effects legends have weighed in too. John Chambers, best known for his work on Planet of the Apes, was suspected of help fabricating the suit. But in an interview before his death, he denied any involvement. Later, special effects artist Bill Munns recreated multiple ape suits using modern materials and concluded that none could replicate the subtle realism of the Patterson creature. Frame-by-frame analysis has also revealed one peculiar detail: the breasts. Patty appears to have visible mammary glands, an oddly specific and biological coherent trait that most hoaxers would likely overlook. Anthropologists have argued that this anatomical feature adds credibility to the idea that it's a biological entity, not a costumed man. Now, more than 55 years later, the film still hasn't been conclusively debunked. It's been stabilized, digitally enhanced, and forensically reviewed by everyone from primatologists to Hollywood effects teams. Yet no one has been able to fully replicate its visual fidelity or the nuanced biomechanics of its subject using 1960s era technology. Beyond the film, the case for Bigfoot rests on physical evidence, and there's a mountain of it. Over 1,500 documented footprints casts, dozens of hair and SCAT samples, hundreds of audio recordings, thousands of eyewitness accounts. Let's begin with the tracks. Footprint evidence is perhaps the most abundant category. Starting in 1958, when Jerry Crew photographed and cast 16-inch tracks in Bluff Creek, the same area where the Patterson film was shot, researchers have collected prints from across North America. Some of the most compelling come from the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. But there are reports as far as Florida, Texas, and even rural upstate New York. These prints aren't just big, they're anatomically consistent. Many display dermal ridges, skin flexion creases, and a mid-tarsal pressure point. Dr. Jeff Meldrum has analyzed hundreds of them and published findings suggesting the tracks exhibit authentic primate locomotor features, including pressure ridges, toe splay, and step distribution that would be extremely difficult to fake using wooden carvings. Perhaps the most fascinating prints are the 1969 Cripplefoot tracks found in Bossburg, Washington. These prints were deformed, consistent with the clubfoot, and appeared to show anatomical details of muscle and bone abnormalities that would require intimate podiatric knowledge to fake. Dr. Grover Krantz, a respected physical anthropologist from Washington State University, studied them extensively and concluded they were not hoaxed. Then there's hair. Dozens of samples have been collected, and nearly all were later matched to known animals like bears, deer, horses, or humans. But a few remain unexplained. In 1995, a hair tuft collected in Blue Mountains of Washington underwent microscopic and DNA analysis. The structure didn't match any known North American mammal, but degraded mitochondrial DNA limited further conclusions. In 2014, Oxford geneticist Dr. Brian Sykes led a large-scale DNA study using over 30 samples submitted by BIGFOOT researchers. The study was peer-reviewed and published in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Most samples were traced back to bears, canids, or ungulates. But one curious result from Bhutan turned out to be a hybrid species of brown and polar bear, a find that raised as many questions as it answered. We also have audio, and the most famous recordings are the Sierra Sounds, captured by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in the 1970s. These tapes include growls, howls, and what sounds like a kind of language. Deep, rapid vocalizations that have since been called samurai chatter. Navy cryptologic linguist Scott Nelson reviewed the recordings and claimed they displayed signs of an intelligent language system, including syntax and phonemes not present in any known wildlife calls. Even today, researchers deploy autonomous audio recorders in remote forests to capture possible calls. In 2002, a project in the Olympic Peninsula yielded several hours of anomalous howls that remain unidentified. Vocal ranges outside of known species, but not yet proven to belong to anything undiscovered. And then we have SCAT and nesting behavior. In 2000, researchers near Skookum Meadows in Washington found an impression in the mud that appeared to show a reclining primate. Hair and skin cell samples were recovered, and while DNA results were inconclusive, the cast remains one of the few alleged body prints in Bigfoot lore. For every thread of compelling evidence in the search for Bigfoot, there's a tangled knot of hoaxes, opportunists, and media circus acts muddying the waters. And if we're going to approach this investigation with integrity, we have to face the fakes head on. Let's start with Ray Wallace, the man often blamed for kicking off the entire Bigfoot craze. In 1958, a massive 16-inch footprints were discovered at a logging site in Bluff Creek, California. These tracks were widely publicized by newspapers and credited with coining the term Bigfoot. But after Wallace's death in 2002, his family came forward with wooden foot molds and confessed that he had faked many of the tracks as a prank. The media used this confession to paint the entire Bigfoot phenomenon as a hoax. But here's where nuance matters. Ray Wallace might have faked some tracks, but he didn't create the concept of Bigfoot. Native American lore, from the Salish SASQUATCH to the Shishali's tribe SASQUATCH, predates Wallace by centuries. So while Wallace exploited public fascination, he did not invent it. Then there's the infamous Georgia Bigfoot freezer hoax of 2008. Two men, Rick Dyer and Matthew Whitten, claimed to possess a frozen Sasquatch body and even held a press conference with photos. But the corpse turned out to be a rubber costume stuffed with roadkill. Dyer would later admit to orchestrating the hoax for publicity and profit. What makes hoaxes so damaging isn't just that they fool the public, it's that they create a chilling effect on legitimate research. When headlines declare Bigfoot proven fake every few years, serious scientists become even more reluctant to engage with the topic, fearing ridicule from peers. Still, not all hoaxes are created equal. Some are amateur pranks, others, like the claims made by Todd Standing, who presented high-definition videos of animatronic-looking Bigfoots blinking at the camera, sparked fierce debate even within the Bigfoot community. Standing was sued by skeptics for fraud, though the case was ultimately dismissed. The media, meanwhile, has played a dual role. On one hand, it amplifies every hoax with breathless headlines. On the other, it trivializes real investigation by reducing it to tabloid material. Shows like Finding Bigfoot or Mountain Monsters may entertain, but they often replace scientific rigor with manufactured suspense. In short, hoaxes don't just cloud the truth. They actively bury it beneath layers of distrust, misinformation, and profit motives. But if we're to take the search seriously, we can't let the fakes define the phenomenon. So where does science actually stand on the Bigfoot question? In a word, skeptical, but not entirely dismissive. Mainstream biology demands a body. It's the gold standard for species verification, one that cryptozoology has never met when it comes to Sasquatch. No bones, no fossils, no DNA from an indisputable Bigfoot corpse. Yet, over 10,000 documented eyewitness reports exist. These sightings span centuries, continents, and cultures. They come from hunters, park rangers, soldiers, indigenous elders, and ordinary citizens, many with no prior interest in Bigfoot lore. Some of the most compelling accounts describe behavior consistent with known primate species, wood knocking, rock throwing, territorial vocalizations, and even observed family groups. 1994, Paul Freeman, a U.S. Forest Service patrolman, claimed to have encountered a group of Sasquatches in Washington state. He cast tracks, collected hair, and reported intricate behaviors. His credibility was vouched for by colleagues, yet mainstream scientists ignored his evidence. This is where we hit a philosophical wall. Science requires repeatability, but encounters with Bigfoot are spontaneous, unpredictable, and fleeting. You can't summon a Sasquatch on cue. Dr. John Bindernagel, a Canadian wildlife biologist, argued that dismissing thousands of consistent reports violates the scientific method itself. If science is supposed to investigate unexplained phenomena, why does it categorically reject Bigfoot without testing the evidence? The answer may lie more in culture than data. Science prides itself on skepticism, but it's also influenced by academic trends, funding, politics, and reputation risk. Few scientists want their careers tied to something labeled as pseudoscience, no matter how compelling the evidence. Still, the tide may be slowly turning. In recent years, peer-reviewed journals have published forensic analysis of track casts. Institutions like the North American Wood Ape Conservancy have launched multi-year field studies. And advancements in environmental DNA technology could soon allow researchers to detect species based on trace skin cells left in streams, mud, or foliage. So while science hasn't confirmed Bigfoot, it hasn't disproven it either. The evidence exists, just not in the format academia prefers. Bigfoot isn't just a biological mystery, it's a psychological one also. Why do millions of people believe in something science hasn't confirmed? It starts with pattern recognition. Human brains are wired to find meaning in randomness. It's called pareidolia. That's why we see faces in clouds or hear voices in static. In the forest, that wiring can turn shadows into shapes and rustling into footsteps. But not every sighting is misinterpretation. Many are detailed, extended encounters. The belief in Bigfoot often arises not from hearsay, but from personal experience. Once someone sees something they can't explain, the belief becomes rooted not in fantasy, but in trauma, awe, and obsession. Cultural influence plays a role too. In North America, Bigfoot is an icon. It's on bumper stickers, beer labels, and festival flyers. The lore has been passed down through generations, gaining momentum through books, documentaries, and now viral TikToks. This cultural ambiguity can prime people to interpret ambiguous events as Sasquatch encounters. Then there's the outsider effect. Believing in Bigfoot often means stepping outside mainstream consensus. It attracts skeptics, misfits, and those disillusioned with institutional authority. For some, Bigfoot isn't just a cryptid, it's a symbol of mystery in an overmapped world. Dr. Christopher Bader, a sociologist who studies paranormal belief, found that Bigfoot believers often score high on openness and curiosity. They're not gullible, they're exploratory, and that distinction matters. Dismissing all believers as crackpots ignores the emotional and psychological complexity of their experiences. Whether Bigfoot is real or not, the belief is. And that belief is a mirror reflecting our deepest desires to find wonder, to challenge authority, to reconnect with the wild. So, what do we make of Bigfoot? After all the prints, the sightings, the DNA, the hoaxes, the heartbreaks, and the hope, is Sasquatch a biological reality? A relic hominid hidden in the margins of the world? Or is it a cultural projection? A shadow we've cast into the forest shaped by fear, wonder, and memory? Here's what we know. The Patterson-GIMLIN film has never been definitively debunked. Footprint casts display features beyond what crude hoaxers could fabricate. Hair samples, while inconclusive, have raised real biological questions. And sightings continue, even in the era of drones, satellites, and surveillance. But we also know that Bigfoot hasn't left behind a body, a fossil, or a genome. That's the hard edge of science. Until it has physical proof, it remains unconvinced. Yet sometimes absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. History is filled with animals that eluded science for centuries. The okapi, the coelacanth, the mountain gorilla. Maybe Bigfoot is just another chapter waiting to be written. In the end, the search for Bigfoot is about more than a creature. It's about confronting the unknown, challenging the limits of knowledge, and listening, really listening, to the stories that echo from the forest. Because whether fact or folklore, hoax or hominid, one truth remains: Bigfoot lives in our questions, in our wilderness, and in the possibility that some mysteries are still wild enough to be real.